Welcome back to the You Not Me podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can become a leader, whether that's at home, at work, or on a sports team. Leadership is not a title that you receive. It's more of a responsibility that you take, and you take that responsibility for the good of others. Most people think that leadership has to do with authority, power, position, or recognition. But the reality is that leadership begins long before titles appear. The universal truth is that every person leads somewhere in their life. You might lead in a marriage, you might lead in a family, you might lead on a team, and you might lead in the workplace. And at the end of the day, at the very least, you're leading yourself. So today, as we welcome in Chris and Andrew, I just want to bring you guys in by asking you to define leadership according to the You Not Me principles.
Yeah, I think that the biggest example of leadership is being able to actually lay down your life for another and to sacrifice and to serve another person. And so that's what's missing in the world today is people that are willing to look outward and try to see how they can actually help other people grow versus just themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's has nothing to do with titles, and it's all about shifting from what do I get to how can I serve. And when we focus on serving others, it really transforms our household, our teams that we're on, our neighborhoods, and it's infectious. You know, one act of service inspires others to give back, and it creates this ripple effect. And in my experience, it starts small, like helping a neighbor without expecting anything in return, and it ultimately builds stronger communities and teams.
Now, if we're just going to touch on some of the things that leadership is not, I think that the listeners probably have a lot of preconceived notions about leaders. Let's maybe get into talking about some of the things that leadership is not. Popular culture and people often look to a number of qualities that maybe are or are not that indicative of good leadership. What are some of those things that really don't matter, but people often look for when it comes to leadership?
I think that one of the interesting thing is especially when someone gets promoted into a place of leadership, say you're at the workplace, you're interviewing for a promotion, and then they step into this new role. And instead of walking in and just trying to understand where people are, what's going on, how can you help, how can you serve, how can you make their job better and easier? So often they just walk in with, they want to control, they want to dominate, they want to tell people what they need to do. And really one of the hardest things is, especially if it's a peer of yours that gets elevated, then sometimes those people demand their people to do things that they would never do when they were in that role. And so they really abdicate any chance of being a leader because they are basically being a hypocrite. They're very two-faced in the fact that they really are expecting what they never would give of their own. And that's just what destroys leadership.
I completely agree, Chris. It's not about ego. It's all about making the relationship better by giving more than you get. And I think about being a leader, and it really is about carrying the weight for others. And how do you kind of lift others up? How do you lift your team up when you think about relationships, et cetera? Think about a marriage. If both spouses are focused on serving each other, giving time, support, compassion, it creates an unbreakable bond. And the same thing applies if you're a manager leading a team. This mindset is contagious and it spreads and improves the whole dynamic of the team. And it's true whether it's in the workplace or at home or any type of team.
Yeah, and I think that a great reflection for people as we're just starting to dig into what good leadership looks like and feels like, I think that if people become better when you're around or when a good leader's around, then it's evident that that's good leadership. Good leaders are always lifting people around them. As Andrew and Chris both mentioned, and are obviously not putting people down, not looking to maintain their power, but they're really focused on taking what they have to offer and really bettering everyone around them through that and by that. We're going to talk about now the kind of the foundation of leadership. One of the big things that I've heard quite a bit is just emphasizing character before competence. I think that people a lot of times kind of fall for this fable of like a finished product, where they want the total package or someone who's really complete to be a leader. But that falls short quite a lot. Skill often can, grab attention but character is really at the end of the day what builds trust. And when it comes to a leader, I think that reliability is probably one of the most important traits. If I think back to a time in my own life, actually, the school that I played soccer for in college, the players would vote on the captains every single year. And my junior year, I was actually voted as one of the captains of the team, but the coach of the team always had the trump card to be able to say whether or not that player was going to be in or out. And so my coach actually vetoed the vote for me. I forget, he said to me, "You can't lead others until you learn how to lead yourself." And at the time, I was like, what is this guy talking about, man? Like, he's got to be blind. But he saw a lot of character flaws in me. And so I asked him, like, I literally was like, what are you talking about? Like, my teammates see me every day, they just voted for me, etc. I had a lot of pride, blind spots. And he said, you can't bring my kids to training because I don't know what you're going to say if your team loses, if your team gets scored on, something like that. And it's just unpredictable. And I don't want that kind of unpredictability leading our group. So that was obviously a big wake up call for me. But I think just kind of as we get into some of the non negotiable traits that you would look for in a you, not me leader, what are some things that listeners can begin to build towards or maybe recognize in other people if they're kind of in a process of identifying good leaders around them?
No, thank you so much, Jared, for sharing that story, because I think that a crucial aspect of character is being a courageous coach and giving balanced feedback that celebrates what's done, but also highlights how we can be more effective. And we all need honest feedback to improve. I think about those times where I've worked with employees or even between me and my manager, and I ask for feedback and I want feedback. Feedback is hard to receive sometimes. It really is. And sometimes we think of constructive criticism as mean, but it's actually meaner to withhold insights and perspective that could help somebody to grow. And this is where building key relationships with people so that you can have influence and that your words do matter. And I also love what you said about leading yourself. It's really about being consistent so that, when you are at work, when you're at home, when you're, in different settings, that you can be consistent. And it's awesome when somebody gives you feedback because you want to be there and grow.
Yeah, I think a lot of that just centers around self-control. And, there are a lot of times that you've seen people that something pops into their mind and they just say it. And sometimes you think to yourself, probably shouldn't say everything that comes to mind. And again, it goes back to just leading well and being thoughtful in the words that you use and also living it out, as you said, Andrew, modeling it consistently so that people know what to expect every day. Who are they getting when that person picks up the phone that day? And is it someone that's going to care deeply about them and want to serve them? Or is it someone that, is just going off the wall crazy about things and they over exaggerate something that's maybe a little small thing. I think what happens is when a leader is all about themselves and they try to be the center of attention and they look at their new leadership position as something that will allow them to get to the next one and they try to use their people, well, eventually what happens is people feel that, they sense that the person takes credit for everything. They're trying to put themselves in the front and center. And that fractures teams. That causes people to no longer actually respect you as a leader. And then those relationships grow cold. And when you show up to work on the hard days, is you want to show up to a place where you deeply care about the people and they deeply care about you. And that's how you get through hard times. Where hard times come and you don't believe that someone actually cares about you, they're going to protect you and try to help you. And then you worry about your job, and then people all start to be selfish and just self-protective, and they throw other people under the bus just to protect themselves. Versus a place where you've seen it like in the movie Rudy, where he was told that he'd be able to start. And then when that was pulled away, all these people went in and put their jersey down and say, well, hey, he can have my spot. And what an amazing difference it is to work in a place where people care that deeply. They're willing to sacrifice because someone else deserves a chance or because someone else needs to be loved and cared for.
No, well said, Chris. And, I also think as a leader, you really need to be transparent that you make mistakes. This is like, I'm speaking for me personally. This is where, I make mistakes every day and, being transparent with your team and your employees where there's opportunities to grow. And I just think that that's creating that transparency gives people the right perspective on kind of how they should look at their own failures and own mistakes that, hey, everybody makes them, and how do we work through them? And
Yeah, and I think that goes back just to humility and just being able to say, I'm sorry and ask for people's forgiveness. And, the hope is when you've done something wrong is that you want to reflect upon it, learn, and then try to not do it again, even though, I still make the same mistake sometimes. And I have to apologize again and again or whatever. But the hope is I'm getting more and more turned in a better direction to where I don't make them anymore. So finding a leader that's truly humble enough to receive that, feedback, but also to ask for forgiveness is a huge thing.
Yeah, so this episode is really going to be quite heavy in terms of practicality. So one of the main goals here is just to take a look at what leadership looks like in the different arenas that we named at the start of this episode, which is really just marriage and family, work, and then in a sport or in a group setting like this, chances are if you don't fall into multiple of these buckets, you're at least going to fall into one. And so, Chris and Andrew, really what I'm looking for from each of you here is for each of these, and we're going to start with marriage and family, just talking about what leadership is not in marriage and family, what leadership is in marriage and family, and then maybe just some practical, like, hey, a listener can go home and literally do this today towards their spouse or their kids or their roommates. And we'll do that kind of for each section here moving forward.
So yeah, leadership at home is not, saying I'm the head of the household and controlling people, whether it's your spouse, your kids, and say and do as I say, not as I do. And but it's also not being passive. It's not just sitting back and expecting everything to be done for you and not helping out, or just thinking that somehow these kids are going to actually raise themselves, because what you're doing is you're abdicating your place as a parent to love them unconditionally first and foremost, but then secondly, to actually guide and correct them and speak the truth in love. Because what happens is if we're passive and we just let the world or teachers or social media or coaches raise our kids, we don't know what's actually really been said. So when we delegate that responsibility to somebody else, we have no idea what's really being spoken into their hearts. And I can promise you 9 times out of 10, actually probably 99 out of 100, it's not that they're unconditionally loved. And so I think we have to, as parents, love our spouse well, make sure they feel secured, valued, and deeply cared for. And same as our kids. That was one of the things, I mean, with even just you, not me, the part of the way that a lot of this really even started was going through obviously the loss of finances during real estate and all the other things, health things. But I had a good marriage at the time, but it wasn't amazing. And it wasn't amazing because my wife wasn't loving me well. It was that I wasn't loving her as well as I should have. And when I understood this, and when I understood that my number one job was to make sure that she felt loved, valued, and cared for, and secure, she started loving me better than she ever had. And again, this it falls on me. There are a lot of times in marriages where people say, "Well, it's not my fault. That person isn't loving me well." Well, then the question is, can you love better? Can you love harder? Can you love deeper? Can you love stronger? And if the answer is yes, you can do more, than do it. And I promise, Andrew, as you said, you will never regret loving somebody better than you already are. And it's one of the things where it is contagious, where it's a natural reaction to when someone does something for you that you're so grateful for, the amount of loyalty and love and care that they're going to give back. It's not why you do it. You do it with a pure heart to love them well, but it's unbelievable when you really do it and live it out.
And it comes down to, who are you giving your A game to? Do we give our A game to our work, our job, everything outside the house, and then we come home with feeling depleted and bringing our D game or our F game home? And it's just making sure that we're giving the importance and our best to the most important people in our lives, because we're replaceable in our jobs, we're replaceable in other roles, but there's one chance to be a father, one chance to be a great husband, and needs to be our focus and where we bring our A game home.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, one of the things that obviously, when we were with Command College with all the different law enforcement agencies, I mean, that was one of their big takeaways is who I am at work. I need to be that and better at home, because right now work is getting more of my A game than home, and I need to change. Some of the practical actions you can do is leading with presence. Just, there are a lot of people who say, I'm providing for my family, and that's my job and that's all I need to do. And really, your kids, your spouse, what they want is you, not just the dollars that you bring in. Like, the dollars you bring in is great, it provides, but the presence is what they want. And then also, I mean, we have a chance to lead before other people choose to take things in a different direction, to set the emotional tone at home. Again, back to when you apologize, there are times I've had to get down on one knee when my kids were young and apologize to them for something I said to either their brother or my wife that was in the wrong tone, or maybe I snapped because I was stressed. But when they can see that that quickly my heart is sorrowful and repentant, and I realize what I've done and that I really want to make it better. And when I say, I'm so sorry, I love you, please forgive me, like those are some of the 9 most powerful words you can ever say, especially just to just a young child, for them to see that their dad is willing to humbly ask for forgiveness and to say they're sorry. And that's one of those generational impacts that they see and is modeled for them in their marriage, that hopefully they'll do the same with their kids and their spouse.
Yeah, if we look at leadership at work, I think that a lot of the ways that leadership is often reflected is through titles. But as we mentioned earlier, leadership is one of those things that really goes far beyond the title. And a lot of times the title comes after a lot of these qualities have really been cemented in a person. So, what are some things that leadership is not in the work environment?
Yeah, I think this is the hard thing, especially obviously for us, me, we want to help everybody, but especially the people that are just graduated college and just getting out in the working world, is sometimes they wait for permission to do something, and instead of just looking around and seeing the need and raising their hand, and they say, here I am, how can I help, how can I serve, like I see this as an issue, I see you're struggling. And people take note of people that identify the need, try to find a solution and do it, because too often the majority of people, they just complain and they say this is wrong, and they tell somebody above them and they say, I can't do my job because of this. Well, is there a way that you can actually fix it? Because too often we just consistently blame other people, and we're pointing the finger outwardly instead of pointing the finger at ourselves and saying, well, what can I do? How can I maybe be a solution, or make it less, or make it more tolerable and less of an issue for other people? And it's, again, just seeing the need around you and acting upon it.
Yeah. Nobody wants to deal with constant complainers. They're literally a cancer in the organization, and spreading negativity kills morale and productivity in any team. And we all slip into that sometimes, but we got to pause and ask ourselves, what is it that we need to ask ourselves, is what we're saying and doing, is that helping the team move forward? Is it holding them back? And we really need to take personal accountability versus blaming others. And when we see that on the team, we need to call out our peers and teammates and help to cut that off, because that's what really destroys a team from within. And I also see people, Chris, that are all focused on the promotion. They're all like, hey, I want to get promoted. I want that next title. And that's what they ask their managers for. They say, hey, I want to be promoted. That's what's most important, versus actually focused on, where can I step up in leadership? Where and how can I make a bigger impact to the organization and to the team? Because those actions will naturally lead to the advancements that you want. And just challenge yourself to figure out ways to do more, but don't ask for that promotion or the title without asking for ways that you can be giving back, and focus on the team and focus on the organization to make it better.
I mean, even if you look at, say, for example, a restaurant, which is unbelievably, the food has to be good, yes, but also the customer service and what the customer feels while they're there is such a big deal. And if you look at the best restaurants that are out there, there's one here in Charlotte called Lang Van that's been a staple here in Charlotte for so many years. Uh, their food is excellent. The people, they love their customers so well. I mean, they give them hugs, they say, "See you tomorrow," when they leave, but also you see different people, that nobody is just, a server. Nobody's just a busboy. Nobody's just the water. No, so everybody does everything. And when they walk by and they see an empty plate, instead of saying that's someone else's job to pick it up, they pick it up and take it in the back. And if somebody sees someone's water, they grab a picture and they fill it. And again, I mean, we go there to eat, yes, because the food is fantastic, but also we just love the people. And I give way bigger tips there than I do anywhere else, because there's such amazing people that care deeply. I mean, they're even so good as, like, they actually remember all of our orders. And so when they see us walk in and sit down, they put our appetizer in right away, everything before we even sit down. So it's, again, when you just go back to wherever your place of work is, if you can see the need around you, try to make other people's day more enjoyable, feel, that they're valued, it changes everything.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, Chris, because when you think about the workplace, just to challenge yourself to do some easy steps to connect with the team. And so, like, it could be as simple as starting your day with a 15-minute walk around the floor to say good morning to people, ask how they're doing, learn their names, pop by their desks to chat about life. And or starting a meeting, recognizing others before hitting the core topics of the meetings. These are really simple things, but they build and foster relationship and growth and show that you're approachable and show that you're focused on the actual team, not just an activity or an action. We all love those kind of experiences at restaurants and places that you see people that are selfless, and that's what makes a great organization. I mean, I
Sure.
think this is really something else to highlight here is really about courageous coaching and giving balanced feedback to build people up and communicate early to support your manager and coworkers and do the behind the scenes work to protect the culture.
And one of the other things that I think is really important is regardless of whatever your position is you can still protect the team culture and the fact of caring about people, but also maintaining the standard and actually raising the standard. Because I think what happens is there are people that look around to other people for guidance on what to do, what not to do. And instead, think about what you should do and think about what is going to make everything and everybody around you better and do it. Because the best workplaces, the best teams, the best, everything has a standard that everybody knows and they try to live up to, if not exceed. And so as a leader, if you are asking everybody else to do this standard, but your standard's down here, that's going to cause a problem. So make sure that you're really being intentional to actually be at the standard and be above it, because it keeps going and it becomes one of those things that it's it's just self-perpetual. And the fact that once everybody knows what the standard is, everybody tries to maintain it. And then when they see someone coming off of that standard, they lovingly correct and say, hey, we're not here, we're here, this is our standard. And when you work for XYZ corporation or play for XYZ team, or you're a part of the Bierman family, whatever it is, this is how we try to live every day. We're going to fall short, but when you lovingly help people remember what the standard is, that's how great things happen at the workplace.
And I think, Chris, holding people accountable to that standard, and that I think we've all been on teams where you have somebody on the team that's not meeting that standard, and they are in some cases allowed to kind of operate in that way because the manager of the team is not playing their role to hold people accountable. And so I think that's something else that's really important, that whether it's your peer, whether it's an employee on your team, but really holding people accountable to hit that standard is really important, or else the whole culture of the team can erode.
Yeah, two really apropos reflections there from both of you, especially just leading into this next section, just talking about sports teams and more so group settings. One of the things that I've heard from each of you is just setting the standard and also then holding each other to that standard once you've set it yourself, just through accountability and not being afraid to have hard conversations with people. What's maybe one more thing that leadership is before we look at what leadership's not in those settings?
Yeah, I think the hardest thing to do is whether you're under time pressure, again, if it's a sports team and you're in the game, the time is running out, the game, you're losing the game, or a second half, you're losing the game, or you made some mistakes or whatever, is how can you, instead of just lambast other people and rip into them when they make mistakes, how can you actually elevate them and speak truth into them as far as what you know that they can do and encourage them on? And the hardest thing is when you watch a game, especially when I had young kids and was trying to point out who were good leaders, and the ones that were doing all the dirty work, not dirty, but the hard work that nobody wants to do. But also, you see somebody that makes a pass and somebody makes a mistake, and instead of just throwing their arms up in the air and whatever, it's like, can't you be like, that's okay, it's a bad pass, don't worry about it, and just kind of like, let's go again. And those are the people that you want on your team, because everybody's going to make a mistake. The question is, how do you then move forward from that mistake? Do you get stuck in the past, and then their mind is just thinking about, don't make another mistake, don't make another mistake, I already made a mistake once, and then you play poorly, versus, all right, next play. And under pressure, we can just bottle up and get so focused versus stepping back. Remember, this game, yes, it matters, but also I'm building my teammate for the next game and for the future rest of the season, and really for who they are as a person in life.
Yeah, and I think it's balancing that whole notion of encouraging in public and correcting in private, and kind of how do you manage that? So celebrate wins out loud in front of the team, boost everybody's spirits, but handle tough one-on-one type conversations more privately to keep trust strong with the player or the employee. I mean, I think those are some of the things that I think about. In that, are there ways that you can be supportive and support people on the team and support your athletes, but have the right supportive conversations, not necessarily in front of the entire team. I don't know if you agree with that, Chris, or disagree, but
Yeah, no, I think one of the things that's also really important is I've seen coaches make really poor decisions where they automatically give the captain band to the best player on the team because they're the best player, but they're actually not the best leader. And what happens is that team doesn't achieve all it could, where versus because again, the coach is worried about the player's ego or whatever. And I've even seen this in college where sometimes they don't make them do fitness tests. They don't hold them accountable for showing up late and all this other stuff. And then they go on to the MLS and they're not ready. And because they're not meeting the standard because they are not humble, they're arrogant and they expect everything to rotate around them. And it's like, no, when you step up into that next level, you're not who you used to be. You might have been a big fish in a small pond in the past, but now you're a small fish in a different pond. And so what coaches and leaders have done is they set them up to fail. And so I think, when I've seen teams where the best player is not the captain, actually the person that is the most encouraging. I mean, again, you look at like Tim Duncan or somebody like that, like what an amazing leader. And it wasn't always about just ripping into people. And I even saw an interview recently where Michael Jordan talked about that, he was probably not the best leader because he would be fiery and emotional. And yeah, he was the best player, but there are other people that consistency and always lifting other people up and making other people better and willing to do the hard work that other people aren't willing to do. Like again, if your best player is a midfielder or a forward and they lose the ball, but they don't want to chase back and back press and try to win the ball back, they just turn and just walk backwards. Like that's not encouraging for the team because they just want to do all the glory stuff, which is go forward and try to score and have their name in lights versus really sacrifice themselves and turn themselves inside out for the team.
yeah, and it makes me think, Chris, of those players that kind of think at times that I'm not getting the props that I deserve. And I think we need to kind of take a step back and ask yourself, okay, what am I doing to recognize and build up my teammates? And when I think about true leadership, it's not just about ability and output. It really is about what are those intangibles that you're doing to make your team better and to build a cohesive team. And so I think that that's something else we just got to remind ourselves that when you look at what makes good teams great or what builds bonds between players on the team, it really is that focus on others and building one another up.
Sure.
Yeah, and I think that leadership also comes at a cost. A lot of people, before they ever lead someone or some group or team or in the workplace, they often have a lot of incorrect views of what it's all about. They think that it's going to boost their resume or it's going to be great to have more power and influence. But leadership probably costs you more than what it gives you at the end of the day. It's always going to cost you comfort, convenience, and ego. And I've heard it said before that leaders eat last. I think that's actually the popular title of a book, but there's actually a sense in which leaders go first in effort, in humility, and in the sacrifice that they make for the people around them. If we're going to go ahead and wrap this episode up, guys, just reflecting here on becoming the leader that people need, what are some of the characteristics as we kind of look back on character traits that every good leader needs?
Yeah, I think, what they've also seen is even people that are whether suffering from cancer or some sort of an illness that causes pain, etc. They've actually seen mentally and physically when instead of focusing on their pain and they instead look outward and say, how can I love the other people around me and how can I encourage them, serve them, etc. Like their pain lessens. And it's very counterintuitive to think that that's the case, but it truly is. When we have, a weight put upon us, whether stress or anxiety or something's going wrong, and if we take the time to step back and look at and see the need around us, when we actually try to serve other people and try to help them, a lot of times our weight gets lessened, but also the answer sometimes pops up or things take care of themselves instead of just getting this tunnel vision of just focusing on ourselves. And then we don't realize that we're hurting other people and we're angry, we're bitter, etc. We're stressed, we're anxious, we're saying things that we really wouldn't say in a normal situation. Instead, step back and then look at the big picture and remember what matters most. And remember that ultimately the victory is already won, and that you just need to put one foot in front of the other to love other people well, where and be present where you are.
Yeah, I think about throughout my career, I've had these moments where I was overwhelmed with anxiety over a very short-term thing versus focused on, what are the right behaviors, what are the right actions that would attribute long-term success. And I just think that that's the key thing for all of us is that we focus on the long game, which is really about building relationships and investing in others and not looking at and focused on a short-term consequence or short-term action but really it's about the long term and what are those things that we can do that have long lasting effects on a team or organization.
I think ultimately the best leaders, though, are the ones that are consistent, the ones that are dependable, the ones that people know what they're going to get when they interact with them. And so, if you want to be a great leader, be consistent, not just this way at work and this way at home. Be consistent in who you are, because then you don't have to think about who am I supposed to be right now. You're the same person everywhere you go and to everyone you meet, regardless of their position of power or almost no power. Can you love everybody equally?
Absolutely. Well, guys, thanks so much for the conversation today. And to all the listeners out there, this has been the You Not Me podcast. Thanks for listening.